Hi, I'm Dan and I'm a beekeeper in West Sussex, and I also work for Beegone. So today we're down at the bees today to show you what happens after we do a bee removal. We'll be going through the condition of the colonies and showing you the health of them once they've been removed from either your chimney, cavity wall, or wherever they've come from. So I've been beekeeping for 4 years now, and my passion is to help the environment and look after the colonies that are removed, because obviously Beegone get surplus colonies, and they supply me with the bees, and I nurture them back to a healthy condition, and then also I end up with lots of honey, which is also very nice too. The influence that they've had on the environment around here has been unbelievable. We've had brilliant blossoms all the way through the hedgerow, all the way across, and even my grandparents' flowers in their garden have been really good this year. So saving the bees definitely has a good impact on your environment, and it's also really nice just to come down here and see them flying around as much as anything. And the fact that I'm being supplied with the bees by Beegone makes me feel really good too. I'm going to light the smoker. Now this is an essential tool for when I'm beekeeping, just simply because what it does is it confuses the bees into thinking that the hive's on fire. It sounds cruel, but it's not. It just stops the attack pheromone from spreading throughout the hive and basically making them attack me. When using a smoker, you should never puff it to the point where it's burning so hot there's a flame coming out the tip, because what can happen is, well, you might burn the bees, or you'll singe their wings, and it's just not very good. So the idea is you just want a light puff of smoke over the frames, just to get the bees just to go down inside the frames, so being all over the top. And the effects of the smoke don't last particularly too long. The effects are only really there when you puff it over, and then once the wind blows across, generally the smoke dissipates, and yeah, they end up returning back to normal fairly quickly. So what you can use to light your smoker with, a bit of old packing paper and some cardboard. You can buy things like special smoker fuels which burn for long hours, which are more ideal. But for today, because we're only going in them just to check how they're doing and not doing a massive inspection today, we don't necessarily need the smoker to burn for long hours, and it's not like we've got 1,000 hives here that we've got to do all day. So you can use a lighter or matches, depends on whatever you like. You just start it off here and just get it burning. That's the main thing first. You just want to get the paper burning first. And just be careful, because obviously that's quite hot. Keep feeding in bit by bit. You can, funnily enough, use when you're inspecting, if you have bits of burr comb that come off the top of the frames, you can actually burn it in the smoker as well, which I do tend to do sometimes if I just want to give it a little boost. And also it's a good way of just getting rid of some of the old wax, really. But don't use too much, because it ends up sitting in the bottom and not burning, so you just got to be sensible. So what I will end up doing now, it's going quite well, I will roll the cardboard up so it's thicker, and then I'll place that inside so it burns longer. You can also buy rolled cardboard for this, which come in sort of a shape like this, and then they're about that tall, and you just slide the whole thing into the smoker. But I mean, you shouldn't need to buy those. I mean, it's cardboard, everyone generally has cardboard. So that's pretty much the smoker lit. And just give it a little puff, just help it. Just let that sit there for a minute. So we're just about to go into this hive. These bees have come from a job that Beegone have done. I believe they said they got them all the way up from somewhere in Leeds from a chimney. So we're going to go into them, see what they're doing, how the brood is, what the queen is like. Even if they might not even have a queen, but I think they do because they're bringing in pollen. And I'll go through and show you what work goes into managing the bees once they've been relocated. So you can see in some of them, of these bees, they're actually carrying in little pollen sacs. There's not one here right now, but you might see one that comes back in a second. If you look at its legs, you should see the pollen sacs. These ones are probably just bringing in water, which is why there's nothing on there at the moment. But one will just catch your eye. That one there had a little bit on. This one here, where my finger is, you see he's got pollen on, he's just gone in. That's a good sign. Generally says that the queen is laying and they're bringing in pollen to feed the bees. So I'm just going to take the brace strap off. This prevents the hive being knocked over, funnily enough, by high winds throughout summer storms as well as the winter. And then it just keeps the hive in one place. So this is the lid. Just take the lid off and place that to one side. On top we've got a feeder, so I will feed the bees a sugar syrup if they need it, but I particularly myself like to reduce how much I feed them because I like to keep it as natural as possible, and I don't want the honey to change in flavour. You can always tell by supermarket honey that it tastes, funnily enough, like golden syrup, because golden syrup is made from a sugar syrup, and they like to blend all their honeys with different EU and non-EU honeys. I could bore you to death with that for hours, but yeah, if you eat beekeeper honey and then you eat shop-bought honey, I can guarantee you'll never go back to shop-bought honey again. And it's also really good because if you're buying honey from a local beekeeper, you're supporting the environment because the money will go towards the beekeeper into buying foundation, hive parts, and it also motivates the beekeeper to keep going because if people are enjoying the honey, then it makes the hobby more enjoyable. So I'm just going to take the plastic cover off. It's like a window. And then in here, you probably can't quite see, but there's two sections that sit deep in here. There's a plastic cover that sits here, and the bees will come up and go down and drink the syrup from inside. They shouldn't actually be able to get in, but for some reason they have. That needs to be filled up soon, so that'll be done probably at the weekend. But for now, don't need to worry about that. So to take a hive body off, I just slide the cutting piece in and very, very gently pry it away. So you can see the frames have actually stuck to the underside of the feeder. So I like to just get my tool in, very gently pry it apart. And you can see all the bees there now. They've actually built comb on there. So that says to me that they might need another box or the frames need moving around. So what I'll do now is I'll just clean off this honey and then I'll put that in the box above. So then the bees can take the honey back down after. So I'm just going to do that now. So you get your cutter piece, just go under the comb like this. You probably see the honey and the cells in there. There it is, there's the honey there, look. I'm just going to place that down here and we'll do the same for the rest of it. Just very gently cut because you don't want to kill any bees while you do this. But I mean, it can be tricky because sometimes you get so many bees. So the reason we're cutting this comb off is because what happens is, like you saw previously, the bees will stick the top of the hive part to the top of these frames, and in turn that makes it really, really tricky for us to inspect without damaging anything else. And then what happens, well, it's the whole part of managing the bees. It's, you know, you've got to cut the comb off, you've got to make sure everything's kept clean and tidy. Yeah, it's quite a lot of work. But what happens is they'll actually block up, see that hole there, they'll actually block this up with comb, and then they can't get up to take the feed from the top. There you go, you can see it just there. So the sugar syrup will actually sit in here, and then the bees will come down off this plastic piece, come up through this slot, and they walk down here, and they shouldn't actually be able to get in to here, but they should be able to drink. You see there, they can't actually get in. So what I'm going to do is, because we've got that cut comb, I'm going to lift this ever so slightly so the bees can get in, so then they can take the honey from the comb that we've cut off. So I'm just going to place that down back on top of here. So the reason we give them sugar syrup is it helps with what's called the nectar flow, and the nectar flow is the bees going out foraging for nectar and simply coming back again. So they will also collect water to help dilute the what they've collected from going out and foraging. So the sugar syrup just helps them pack the stores out a bit more, just encourages them to produce more honey. But when the nectar flow's going, generally you don't need to feed them quite so much. It's when we get to June is when you need to feed. It's what we call a dearth. And the dearth is when the flowers go from sprouting in the spring, and then you have a slight gap before the ones start in summer. And this can really reduce the amount of honey and food that they have. So I'm just going to place the bits of comb over into this part of the hive. You can see the bees are starting to get a bit upset now. So if I just move these over, we're just going to leave that there. So I'm going to take some frames out of the super box now. This is where the honey is made, and there's a queen excluder between this box and the brood box. The queen excluder stops, hence the name, the queen coming up into the bit where you keep your honey frames, and it stops her laying eggs in the area where you want to harvest the honey from. It does make things quite a bit more complicated if there is eggs in here, because it makes it harder to locate the queen. So I'm going to take a frame out, and hopefully you should see that they have packed out one of these frames. You can see a fully packed frame of honey. First we're going to give them a little smoke just to calm them down a bit, because they're getting a bit riled up. So just get the smoker going, a couple of puffs, and this is what I was talking about earlier, just give them a light puff. Doesn't need to be extreme. Just very gently bring them down on top, and then that's simply it. Don't need to go mad with the smoker. So now the bees have cleaned off the top, we can clean the top of the frames. This is where the feeder was sat, and it's quite important because it stops them continuing to make comb and joining the frames together. And we'll just put that in there so they can clean the honey off. So I'm just about to take a frame out. One side is just wax, so the foundation, and then the other side is stacked with honey, and I'll show you the difference between the two. So I'm just going to get my tool, very slowly lift the frame out. So that's one side. You want to keep your movements very slow. You see that there? And now I've stopped, they've calmed down again. So that's the wax foundation side. If I flip it over, you'll see the honey. That is a fully capped frame, and you could harvest that right now. You would cut the wax cappings off, and then I'd put that in a spinner and we'd spin everything out. If I just flip it back round for you again, you'll see inside there's a wire. This is what we call wired foundation. So the wired foundation stops the comb smashing up when you put it into the spinner. It's a lot better, so you can actually, once you've cut the cappings off, you can put this back into the hive, and because you've only cut the first layer off, it means it's less work for the bees to fill the cells back up and recap them again. So I'm just going to put this frame back for you, and I'm going to lift one more out, which I believe is probably fully capped. So grab my tool again. So there's one side. Not quite fully capped, but not far off. And this one hasn't been capped, but you can see the nectar in the cells. And once they're full, they'll cap them off like this. So I'm pretty happy with that. So I might put some more sugar syrup on, just to get the bees to draw that comb out a bit more. So we don't really need to go through the entirety of this box, because it's just a honey making box. I can see the rest of the frames back here haven't got anything in, so just give them another little smoke. They're getting a bit rolled up. I'm just going to lift this box off now, and we'll start to go through the brood box. So how do we tell between the difference between a honey super and a brood box? Well, if you look at the two different sizes, this one's a lot thinner than this one. So that generally speaking, the reason that the super box is smaller than the brood box is just because of weight. Once this box is fully packed out, this can weigh 2 bags of cement, so it could weigh 50 kilograms, which is quite heavy. So if you were to have a frame this big and then have 11 or 12 frames in a honey box, good luck lifting it, because I certainly couldn't lift it. So the reason for that is you would then just add another box, another honey super on top of there, and pack that one out as well. So you would take the boxes off individually, so it just makes things a lot lighter work. Considering that these are plastic boxes or polystyrene boxes compared to the wooden ones, they generally weigh less anyway, so the weight is really only within the frames. So the brood box is generally bigger because the queen will need more space anyway to lay eggs, make young, and yeah, it just needs to be generally bigger. You can get what's called a 12 by 14, I believe, which is pretty much the top of the box to the bottom here, and they're called super deep brood boxes. Depends on the beekeeper. Some beekeepers prefer to use 12 by 14 frames, but I tend to stick to the standard brood frames because it's cheaper, and if I want to make it big, I'll just add another brood box on. So I'm just going to lift this box off. I mean, that's not massively heavy, but it's because there's only 4 frames of honey on there, but you know, it's heavy for what it is. If I was to leave that on all season, I would expect that to be full. Obviously you've got things like swarm control and things to do like that, but generally that box should be a lot more full than it is, but we can sort that out. There's no problem. We just feed them a bit more sugar syrup and they'll pack those frames out again. So this is the queen excluder. It's a piece of plastic mesh which stops the queen from getting into the honey super boxes. Just give them another smoke, just get them to sink down. You'll see that in a minute when they sink. See, they've all sunk down and they've calmed down a bit. That makes it a bit easier to deal with. So again, like we did with the previous 2 boxes, I just get my hive tool underneath, very, very gently pry off. This can irritate the bees sometimes. And just check underneath your queen excluder just to see if the queen's on there, because it can very easily be transferred to a different part of the box if you don't check this. So I like to place mine just back on top of there. Now these are the brood frames. You can see that the bees on the front are actually trying to pull out an elastic band, and those elastic bands are what Beegone have put around my frames to hold the comb in. So the benefit of using rubber bands or elastic bands is the fact that bees can chew through those bands, and by the time they've chewed through the bands, the comb is genuinely attached to the frame. Because obviously when they take the comb out of a chimney or whatever, there's no wires or anything like we do with the wax foundation, because it's all from the original hive. So we have to find a way of attaching them. So I'm going to show you what the wax foundation looks like first, which I put into the colony to. So that's so you can really see you might not be able to see, but this side you can, the wires that run through the foundation. So the bees will actually work this comb out and bring the cells out so the queen can lay in here. I put this to one side so I've just got a bit more room. Just going to take a frame out now that's got the elastic bands around. You can see there. So that's some of the comb that was taken out of a chimney or a wall, and then the elastic band's been placed around the comb. See, that's not been attached in there yet. I might change that out for a different piece of foundation. I mean, it's quite old and quite dirty, so if the bees aren't doing anything with it, I'll probably take that out anyway. Just here you can see it's very thin. That's where the bees have actually chewed the elastic band, and that's why here you can see they're trying to pull it out. I mean, they're a bit rolled up now, so you probably won't be able to see it, but before we opened it they were trying to pull the elastic band out. So I'm just going to move some of these frames along. This might wind the bees up a little bit, but so you can see, there you go. Let's give them another little smoke. So they should have honey in here as well as brood. There's no brood on there at the moment, but there's quite a few bees. They are filling this up with nectar by the looks of it. Yeah, it's all the nectar in there. You can probably see it's all shiny. And that one has actually been chewed off by the bees, so we're just going to remove that. We'll leave those ones in there because the bees will sort those out, but that's looking quite promising. There's no brood on this one, so I'll place that one to one side. So the name brood that we use is a term for the young within the frames in the brood box. So the brood is generally the eggs, the larvae, and the pupae, and then they turn into adults after when they hatch. So the reason we would want to put the queen excluder between the honey super and the brood box is because you don't want eggs, larvae or pupae going into the honey, because it means you've got to filter it more, and also it means that you're killing off your own population of the colony, because once the brood gets cold it normally dies, and then the bees have to work extra hard to clean that comb, and then the queen will have to relay in there, and that can delay a colony by quite some time. So you really want to be careful. Some beekeepers like to leave queen excluders off, because what can happen is the colony will put a band between the honey and the brood, and the queen won't tend to go across the honey because the worker bees will feed the queen. She won't actually feed herself. So I'm going to lift this frame up now. This one here, see there's a swarm cell here, looks like they're going to swarm at some point. So I'm just going to break that off because we don't want them to swarm. And I'll look across the rest of the frame just to check to make sure that there isn't anything else going on, which it doesn't look like there is. So that one's okay. That hasn't got any eggs in it from what I can see. So that one we've checked, that's fine. We can put that across over here just to keep it out of the way. The next frame I'm just about to show you has got brood on it, so I can show you what the cells look like and what they do. And you will be able to see the difference between male bees and female bees. So if you have a look here, these cells is what we call drone brood. So drone brood is male, which are these ones here, and worker brood, which is female, are these cells here. So they're a lot smaller in size. It's perfectly normal to have drone brood within a colony, but you don't want too much of it. Sometimes it will be covered, and that's a really, really bad thing because the drones just eat the food, they don't actually do anything, and they only have one purpose in a colony, and that's to mate with a queen. Not with their own queen, it'd be from another colony. So those drones will actually leave this colony, go off and find another one, mate with the queen, and once they mate, they die. So that's the end of them. So what you want to do is, if you have loads of drone cells, you actually have to destroy them so they don't hatch into anything. This is controlling the colony. It's sad, but unfortunately that's part of beekeeping. You actually have to destroy these. And that's a queen cup there, so we need to destroy that because they've got a queen, because they've got a queen that's laying in here. So I'll cut that one off. It's part of the swarm control. There's some more drone cells here. So if you look just here on this frame, you'll see there's some grubs in here, some larvae. And in between those cells, you should see eggs. It's probably quite difficult to see because they're very, very tiny. I'm not sure there is any eggs in this frame, funnily enough. But they're not particularly too old. They're probably a week old, those. So if there's grubs in here, we've got a laying queen. Just turn it round for you. I'll do the same on the other side. There's another swarm cell here, look. That actually had a grub in there, so they're planning on swarming. There's another one there. So this is why the bees should be removed from your property, really, if you have them. Because they will just simply either populate a neighbouring chimney. When they swarm, bees will she'll either take half the colony with her or a third. It depends on how big the size of the colony is, really. If they get too big, which I think is what's happening here, these need to be split, really. She will take half the colony with her when they swarm. And then the swarm cells will be there to replace the queen after they swarmed, which is perfectly normal. So I'm going to place that frame back, providing we've checked it for all the cells, all the swarm cells and all of the drone cells and everything like that. I'll place that back in here. They've got plenty of room, so I don't see why they need to swarm. They've got loads of empty frames here. Just get these guys put away. That's it from Beegone. Hope you enjoyed the video and see you soon.